He arrived early, the way he always did, pushing the same scuffed janitor's cart through the marble-floored lobby while the building was still quiet enough to hear the echo of his own footsteps. The badge on his chest read Maintenance, Daniel Carter, though most people never bothered to look that closely. To them, he was just the janitor, the man who emptied bins, fixed flickering lights, and stayed invisible by design. Daniel preferred it that way. Invisible meant peaceful. Invisible meant he could finish his work and still make it in time to pick up his daughter from school. That morning, however, the peace was already cracking. Daniel paused near the glass conference wing, carefully mopping a streak someone had left behind the night before. Inside the room, a group of sharply dressed executives sat around a long table, voices tense, faces tight. A large digital screen at the front showed red warning messages, scrolling over lines of code and system diagrams. Even from outside, Daniel could sense the panic. He wasn't trying to listen, but the raised voices made it impossible not to hear. "This outage is costing us millions every hour," a woman snapped. She was standing now, heels clicking against the floor as she paced. Her name, Daniel knew from the placard outside the room, was Melissa Grant, Director of Operations. "We hired the best consultants. Why is nothing fixed?" A man near the screen ran a hand through his hair. "The problem is deeper than expected. The backup systems aren't sensing. We might have to shut the entire network down to prevent corruption." Melissa scoffed. "Shut it down? Do you have any idea what that means for investors? For my job?" Daniel lowered his mop and straightened slowly, his eyes drifting to the screen. He recognized the architecture instantly. The company's internal systems were built on a structure he knew well. One he had helped design years ago, back when his title had been very different. He shook his head slightly and returned to his work. "Not my place," he told himself. "Not anymore." But the voices kept rising. "We're running out of time," another executive said. "If this continues for another 30 minutes, we'll lose client data permanently." Melissa slammed her hand on the table. "Unbelievable. All these degrees, all these salaries, and no one can fix this." The glass door suddenly slid open, and she stepped into the hallway, nearly colliding with Daniel and his cart. She looked him up and down, irritation flashing across her face. "Careful," she said sharply. "This is a restricted area." "Sorry, ma'am," Daniel replied calmly, moving the cart aside. She glanced back into the room, then back at him, as if he were part of the building's malfunction. "Of course this happens today. Even the janitors are in the way." The words stung, though Daniel didn't show it. He'd heard worse. Still, something about the casual dismissal, the assumption that he was nothing more than an obstacle, settled heavily in his chest. "I'll be out of your way in a moment," he said. Melissa rolled her eyes. "Just do your job." Daniel nodded and waited until she stormed back inside before continuing down the hallway. He told himself to forget it. Focus on finishing early. Emma would be waiting at the school gate, backpack too big for her small shoulders, smiling when she saw him. Yet his mind kept returning to the screen, to the problem unfolding in that room. Minutes passed. The tension inside the conference room only grew. A consultant raised his voice, another shook his head in defeat. Someone mentioned calling in emergency external support, though it would take hours. Daniel stopped near the electrical closet, his cart parked beside him. He rested his hands on the handle and stared at the wall, torn. He had walked away from that world for a reason. After his wife passed, after the long nights alone with a newborn, the endless hours and pressure had become impossible. He'd chosen a quieter life, one with predictable hours and fewer expectations. But he also knew something they didn't. He took a breath, then another, and turned back toward the conference room. When he gently knocked on the glass, every head inside turned at once. Melissa's face tightened. "What is it now?" "I'm sorry to interrupt," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I couldn't help overhearing. There might be a way to stabilize the system without shutting it down." A beat of silence followed, then a few incredulous looks. Melissa laughed, sharp and humorless. "You overheard?" "Yes, ma'am." She crossed her arms. "And you think you have a solution?" Daniel hesitated only a second. "I believe so." The room erupted in murmurs. One man leaned back in his chair, smirking. Another whispered something to the consultant beside him. Melissa stepped forward. "Let me get this straight," she said slowly. "You're telling me that, while our entire IT department and outside experts are struggling, you the janitor have an answer?" Daniel met her gaze. "I worked with similar systems before." She let out a short laugh. "This isn't a movie. Please go back to mopping the floors and let professionals handle this." The dismissal was public, deliberate. Daniel felt heat rise in his neck, but he kept his tone calm. "If I'm wrong, I'll leave immediately," he said. "But if I'm right, it could save you a shutdown." Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but another voice cut in. "Wait," said an older man at the end of the table, the company's founder. He studied Daniel closely. "What do you mean, similar systems?" Daniel swallowed. "I used to design network architectures. Years ago." The founder's eyes narrowed slightly. "Where?" Daniel named a firm. "A respected one." The room fell quiet. Melissa scoffed. "So, what? You quit a high-paying job to become a janitor here?" Daniel didn't flinch. "Life changes." The founder leaned forward. "What's your idea?" Melissa turned sharply. "You can't be serious." "We don't have many options left," the founder replied. "Let him speak." Daniel walked toward the screen, aware of every eye on him, of the weight of years pressing down. He pointed to a cluster of nodes highlighted in red. "The issue isn't the backup failing," he said. "It's trying to sync in real time with a corrupted index. You're essentially forcing bad data to overwrite itself." One consultant frowned. "That shouldn't be possible. It is if the checksum validation was bypassed during the last update." Daniel replied, "Probably to save time." A few heads turned toward Melissa. Daniel continued, "Instead of shutting everything down, isolate these nodes, reroute traffic through the secondary path, and rebuild the index locally before reconnecting." Silence. Then the consultant spoke again, more cautiously. "That might work, but we'd need admin-level access." The founder stood. "Get it?" Melissa stared, stunned. "You're actually listening to him." "We're listening because we're desperate," the founder said, "and because he hasn't been wrong yet." Minutes later, Daniel stood beside the IT team, hands moving confidently across the keyboard as they followed his instructions. Lines of code scrolled. Alerts disappeared one by one. A tense minute passed, then another. Finally, the red warnings vanished, replaced by a green status bar creeping steadily forward. "We're stabilizing," someone whispered. Data streams normalized. The system held. A breath Daniel hadn't realized he was holding escaped his lungs. The room erupted not in cheers, but in stunned silence, followed by scattered applause. The founder laughed softly, shaking his head. Melissa stood frozen, color draining from her face. You fixed it," she said, barely audible. Daniel stepped back from the screen. "It should hold now." The founder extended his hand. "Daniel, is it? Thank you. You just saved this company." Daniel shook it politely. "Glad I could help." Melissa cleared her throat. "I didn't know." Daniel looked at her, not with anger, but with something quieter. "Most people don't." He turned toward the door, reaching for his cart. "Wait," the founder said. "Where are you going?" "Picking up my daughter," Daniel replied. "School lets out soon." The founder smiled. "Come see me tomorrow. We should talk." Daniel nodded, then walked away, the echo of his footsteps softer now, lighter. As he pushed his cart down the hallway, the building felt different. Not because people suddenly respected him, but because the truth had surfaced, if only for a moment. That evening, as Emma ran into his arms outside the school gate, Daniel smiled, knowing that no matter what title he carried, he had already solved the only problem that truly mattered.